Good Sunday evening, everybody, and welcome to another show of the top 50 classic adventures of all time. I am your co-host, Chris, and to my virtual left, as always, my other co-host, Rick. Rick, say hi to everybody.
Hey, folks. How is life treating you, Chris?
Good. It's finally calmed down. The last time we were on a show a month
Mhm.
ago was the day before all the movers came and emptied out my entire house of
Wow.
18 years. So I am set up in temporary housing. All my stuff is still boxed up in storage. I did check on all my board games and all my game books yesterday in the storage unit. They're all
There
doing
you go.
good. My babies are all doing fine. But yeah, no, it's all good. Everything's going well. About 2 more months, and hopefully I'll be doing this move all over again. But enjoying kind of the last couple weeks of not being going so crazy with
Hmm.
everything. But now crazy with we're scrambling to get Thracia and
Hmm.
all the associated Thracia books to the printer at the end of this week before the holidays. So it's a busy week. It was a working day today for the most part, and now it's not a working day. I get to hang out and have a good time talking old classic adventures
Yeah.
with you. So how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. I just got back from a lovely week down at the Jersey Shore, went down to
Oh,
Cape May, which is the southern tip of New Jersey. For people who don't know the state, it's really lovely down there. And as Chris knows, of course, as I go away from my house, and once I get to about 160 miles away from my house, that's when this Wormwood game table that I ordered almost 3 years
woo.
ago decides to arrive at my doorstep. And I get a picture from UPS or whoever it is of this enormous mound of boxes on my front door, which is now,
Wow.
4 hours away from me.
And
So
you had to drive back to,
so
oh,
no, that I happily the cavalry came in and
nice.
basically somebody came with a Subaru and it literally filled their Subaru all these I wish I could share the picture here of it because it was
Wow.
ridiculous. The amount of
Wow.
it must have filled up the delivery truck. It was a horrendous amount of boxes. But yeah, somebody rescued the boxes, then the boxes had to come back here. Then I recruited some friends to assemble the said table, but I am sitting in it now. It's good, it's beautiful, everything's good in the world. So
Right. Well,
phew.
I look forward to playing a game on
So
it.
yeah,
So
I look forward to having you here, my friend.
So yeah, we had a very, very amazing game. People can't. All right, so all the people in the chat can hate on me as I reveal this because everybody else has. I have never seen the movie The Thing, the 1982 classic. But we played The Thing board game about a month ago. I was a guest at Rick's non-Wormwood game table. And we had an absolute blast playing this board game because we role
That
played
was
it, of
fun.
course. We role played it, of course, and it was awesome. We
Mhm.
came right down to the end. People didn't
Yeah,
know who was who. It was
didn't know
great.
who was, yeah.
Yeah,
We
it
had a
was
very
awesome.
good, very subtle thing player. So
Yeah,
uh and then you got thingified before the
I
end of
got
the game.
thingified, but I kept it nice and quiet.
Yeah.
Everybody,
And
you
then I
guys
think
thought I was your salvation, getting
that's
to the
right. Yeah.
helicopter and taking off,
I was
and
running to the
then
helicopter
surprise.
ready to escape with the thing
Yep.
because Chris got infected by a bad dog.
Yes. That dog. That dog. So yeah, it
You
was
gotta watch
awesome.
out for those huskies. It's just
Yeah.
bad news. But
It was a great time though. It was a great time.
yeah, no, it was fun. I that's the sad thing I think was we played with four people and I was the only person at the table who had actually seen the movie.
Yeah.
Um, but I've rectified that in one count because my one other friend who was with us, who's a bit older,
No.
I have since sat down with him and we have watched the thing
Oh,
together. So,
okay.
and
It's on my
put it on your
list.
list,
I
Chris.
need to do it. I
Yeah.
need to do it. That and I
Uh,
need to watch The Goonies,
because
apparently.
yeah,
So,
because
um,
it basically, I think after playing the game, he got curious about it, and
a
I
little
mean,
bit, a little bit.
every geek
So,
needs to sit down and I literally
I
have a
agree.
McReady figure
Oh no. Oh no, we got props. We got
on my
props coming
shelf.
in.
I have a McReady figure.
Nice.
That's what a thing fan I am. So
All
anyway,
right. So cool. So let's so
adventures.
we could talk classic movies and board games all night, but that's not
That's
what we're
true.
here for.
No,
We are here to talk about the classic top 50, and we are in the 20s. We're in the top 20s now. So it's getting real. It's
it
getting real
is.
and it's getting awesome. So let's jump right into number 20.
Number 20.
All right, and this is a
All right, look at
theme.
that.
This is a theme that you're going to see all night. These are names that Chris can't say. Masks of Nyarlathotep,
I pronounce it Nyarlathotep.
Nyarlathotep. Okay, I
Yeah,
was not even close.
Nyarlathotep.
Nyarlathotep.
But that's just
Yeah,
me.
that's probably right. Yeah, so Call of Cthulhu Classic. I have heard of this one. I do not own it. I know virtually nothing about this adventure except for the little bits and pieces I've gleaned for research for this show. And it has now a spot on my list of after I move, because I don't want to move it again. I will be purchasing this one because apparently there is an updated 2018 awesome version of this adventure. So Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about this classic Call of Cthulhu campaign?
Sure. I do own it. Not sure if I own the first printing or second printing, but I have one of the first printings. I've never run it. I've never played through it. I would love to do that. I would love to go through it as a player because I don't know it that, I haven't read every single detail of every little adventure. But I would honestly, as I said when we were in the green room, if this didn't show up on our list, I kind of would have been mightily disappointed. It's the one Call of Cthulhu adventure, maybe except for the Orient Express, that really screams to be on this list. Let's see. The one thing that really jumps out here for this adventure to me is the length. It's basically a campaign length adventure at a time when, campaign length adventures were not the thing.
They were not a thing.
Um, I mean, when this came out, Call of
This
Cthulhu, the
in
game was only like,
1984 was the
yeah.
first
I mean,
printing.
Call of Cthulhu was only 3 years old.
Wow.
Most adventure modules, if you bought them, were like 10 to 30 pages.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it was the first adventure campaign. I mean, because we've discussed Enemy Within. Obviously, there's the Giant series. What else? There's Griffin Mountain for RuneQuest is a long one. I mean, there are some kind of campaigns that date back to the 80s, but this is definitely one of the first. And it's nonlinear pretty much, and it has a sandboxy feel, and that's just, it can't be overstated how, to me, out of the norm that is for adventures that were coming out of it. It just was a very radical thing to do, I think, for this period. So that screams to me, as I'm sure we'll get into, it's a very globe-trotting adventure, which I think is
Yeah.
awesome. A variety of locales. You have to start in New York because you kind of get your initial clues in New York, but then after that, you can bounce all over the place. You can go to Africa, you can go to Shanghai, you can go to London, you can go. You don't even have to go to some of these places. You can miss a country, or you can go to a country and double back to the United States or whatever. And then they put these little side quests in there that are sort of peripheral to the main thing.
Nice.
Um, which I think the whole setup is cool. I think, like most long Call of Cthulhu adventures, it's definitely a challenge for a keeper, because you've
Yeah.
got lots of NPCs. You got to keep the historical stuff sort of accurate because it is set in the 1920s, and you have to think about travel is very different in the 1920s. No, airliners flying across the Atlantic and that kind of thing. So it's a handful. And this particular adventure, the way it starts, the characters almost don't know what they're looking for, what they're doing, kind of when they're running around New York. And you could probably even have a group get, disillusioned with the campaign at the beginning if the keeper doesn't have their hands on the rein. But I think this is one of those things where once you start playing through it and the pieces start clicking in, then I could see like the magic happen.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's just an opus thing, and again, as we touched on in the green room before we went on, the number of times this has seen different reprints. To me, that's always a sign when you see
Yeah.
an adventure keep coming back again and again after edition, and jumping over years. That's, to me, always a sign you should go out and get your hands on it.
Yeah. Agreed. So originally published in 84, then republished 89, 96, 2006, 2010, 2018, a nice deluxe slipcase edition. So yeah, that's obviously something that we always look at when we're talking about the classics. Also won awards in 1997. It won the Origins Award for Best Adventure, and in 2019 it won the Emmy for Best
Interesting.
Adventure for the reprint. So
Ah,
that's always a great sign
yeah.
as well. And you touched on it great. You were really hoping that this one was going to be on the list. This one was we have, since we're deep into the list now, and some of
Mhm.
these we're getting into some series and things like that. I figured it'd be a good idea to kind of remind folks of like what other numbers won. So we've had two previous Cthulhu adventures. The Haunting was number 40,
Mhm.
and Horror on the Orient Express was number 23. So so far this one is came in at number 20. So Call of Cthulhu making at the
Yeah.
very least three appearances on our list. And then we're gonna start talking a little bit more about the Dungeon Magazine top 30 list as well, because we're starting to get into the ones that have been on that list too. So we'll be able
Yeah.
to compare and contrast and everything. So
I'm
um,
thrilled it's this high on our list that
yeah, no, I am
that it
too.
made number
And I
20, I
think,
think is
when we
awesome.
get into our last show, you'll really see it. I think some folks really put this one pretty high up on their
Mhm.
list because
Hmm.
they truly, and I've seen stuff, if you go around, poke around online, and that folks have dropped lines like best campaign tabletop role playing campaign ever,
Yeah, yeah.
of everything. And it's like, that's pretty esteemed, company to be in. And, and not, I'm sure that not every single person on our list of, esteemed reviewers are Call of Cthulhu players. I'm only a very casual Cthulhu player. So it was I don't even know if it was on my list, but again, I've never played it, so
Mhm.
or been part of it. Very interesting, written by Larry DiTillo, I believe his name is, and apparently he's a Hollywood screenwriter, and I guess they had a strike. They had a writer's strike, and how apropos is that, since we just
Hmm.
had the writer's strike last year. And he was looking for another job while he couldn't write Hollywood stuff. So apparently he wrote things for several game companies in that time frame. So I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
That and kind of makes sense that he would get story right. And in addition to all those places you were mentioning about the globetrotting, I guess he had originally written an Australia adventure, which was later added. And
Mhm.
then they added at some point, I don't know if that was the 2018 version, I think they added the Peru adventure part of it too. So
Mhm.
yeah, so just globetrotting, which is great. We talk about it all the time. A great
Yeah.
adventure has varied environments. It's not all samey.
Mhm.
We talk about Temple of Elemental Evil. Kind of one of the shortfalls of that one is the fact that level
Yeah.
one's kind of like level two, which is kind of like level three, and kind of like level four. It gets a little too, needs to be mixed up a little bit until you get down to those elemental nodes. So
Yeah.
definitely this one has that. So
Yeah, no, there's definitely because even when there is repetition in this, because in a sense, every time the players go to a different country, they're sort of squashing the cult there and the cult
yeah.
leader. But the permutation of the cult in each country is very different.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the fun of it too, is seeing the characters sort of link all these, what they might assume are independent cults into one big plot.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I even think Nyarlathotep is just a really cool entity to use for this because I don't know how to put it, but most of the Call of Cthulhu creature, most of the Call of Cthulhu baddies, they're sort of like very indifferent. It's that whole cosmic indifference thing where they just roll over you and you're a gnat to them and that's that. Where they kind of portray Nyarlathotep as being, I mean, hence the masks of having a lot of faces and having more personality and being more devious and not just happy rolling over you, but more the type that will, do something horrific to you that will, hypnotize your kids into being cannibals and then show up to watch them eat you and you hear your screams kind of
Whew.
thing.
Well,
It's like that kind of thing, where it's just a very cool villain to center a whole full length
yeah.
campaign around. I think they couldn't have picked a better one for this. So,
Yeah.
um,
I've heard it's very deadly. I've heard it's very deadly and it could go off the rails really quickly, which
yeah.
I think you could probably say that for most Call of Cthulhu adventures, where I remember back when I played Call of Cthulhu back in the 90s,
Mhm.
as soon as you started shooting, it wasn't good. Like, you did
Yeah.
not want to get into a firefight,
No.
in Call of
It's
Cthulhu.
I
That was
mean,
the
Call of
last thing you
Cthulhu in
wanted.
general is not really a shooting game. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's definitely people that would use the pulp Cthulhu for this, and I know it's been used in that way, and that some people prefer it that way because the sheer length of the campaign, you're just adding that extra deadliness and madness, and there are a lot of little like kind of like peripheral side quests in here that aren't even really central to the main plot. Basically, just places where if the characters go off, on a tangent in one of these countries, they can really get killed.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely lethal. You definitely, again, I think, I don't know, not a beginner's campaign. You definitely want to have, a group of seasoned players, I think, to go through this. I think that's why I never ended up going through it myself, is I'm not a super experienced keeper. I always looked at this and it looked so daunting to try to do
Mm.
this, and I knew I would need the right group of people, and most of my friends are more D&D players than Cthulhu players. So it just never happened around, that I had the experience or had enough of an experienced group to feel like we could kind of pull it off.
Gotcha. All right.
But yeah,
Excellent.
lots of accolades there. Dragon
Yeah.
Magazine, game critic Rick Swan, who did their reviews for years, he ranked Masks as what he felt was the best RPG supplement ever. So
Yeah. Ever. That's pretty strong words.
yeah.
So yeah, and a lot of people chiming in on here. The seventh edition version is massive. That's the one I got my eye on.
Mhm.
So happy Peru was made this list. Peru was a cool addition. Yep, Peru and Australia now part of it. Yeah, so thanks. So lots of folks tuned into a good show tonight. They seem to have some familiarity with it. So that's great. So yeah, I look forward to hopefully getting it maybe around the holiday season. I
Mhm.
know we're coming into spooky season right now, but
Yeah.
but I look forward to getting it hopefully shortly, and kind of tearing into it and seeing what all the hubbub is about because I'm excited. I am excited. So, all right. Any other final words on
Yeah,
this
I
one?
think we can roll on to the next one.
All right, so let's move on to number 19. We are inside of the top 20 now. Number 19 coming up next.
Number 19.
All right, so we continue the theme of Chris not being able to pronounce names in the title. So we have S4, the Lost Caverns of, I'm going to say Tsojcanth? Tsojcanth. I used to
So
be able
yeah, that's I say
to.
to Tsojcanth. So I
Tsojcanth.
have no
Yeah.
clue if that's right.
Yeah, J's and C's should not be next to each other. That's all I'm gonna say, ever. But anyway, yes. So this is, I mean, when you say classic, this one kind of comes to mind, in my opinion. Written by Gary Gygax with the amazing cover
Oh my God.
by Errol Otis uh,
Yes.
of the Behir. And again, sometimes we talked about this, I think, during our Monster Manual show. A picture just elevates something. And we talk about there were some monsters in the original Monster Manual that didn't have pictures, and those did not catch on, and those are like nobody ever remembers those. But everybody remembers the picture of like, the Carrion Crawler and the Umber Hulk and stuff like that. And I think that's the same with this adventure. You see that cover and you see that Behir
Oh
and you
yeah.
see that lightning, and you just know all about that creature right from the get-go. So I know
It's
this is
funny.
one of your very favorite
Yeah.
adventures,
And
right,
it's
Rick?
funny, it's so funny you mentioned that. 'Cause I love that. I mean, back when we interviewed Errol Otis for Talking TSR, it was like my great pleasure to tell him in person how much I love that cover, because that's
Yeah.
always been one of my top Errol Otis covers, if not my top Errol Otis cover ever of anything, because he always has these very animated illustrations, and that one's just great with the breath and with all that. It's
Yeah.
just don't redo it. It's good.
It's a keeper.
Um, so yeah, I do like this one. I've kind of heard all the criticisms, and I don't disagree with them. It's definitely a lot of caverns with monsters. At the end of the day, it's got that what is it, the expression monster hotel feel to
Yes.
it,
Yep.
for lack of a better term. So yeah, I think it's accurate, but I do think there's a lot of fun little encounters in here. Fantastic add-on book, not a throwaway add-on book, but a really good, I mean, a lot of good classic monsters that have gone on, and
Yep.
gone on in the game for quite a bit. You got the Darrow and Beholder, and I mean Darrow and Behir, and
Yep.
there's a whole in kind of Gygax's old-fashioned style. There's a lot of demonic spells in there, focusing on summoning critters from the lower planes. The kind of stuff you didn't see in later editions was definitely in there. And as we've discussed on previous shows, you had that wonderful last encounter, right? Where
Yeah.
uh was Igwil's daughter is in this circular room, but I love how you get to the room, because if you look at the map, there's all these doors sort of terminate in a circle at this room, and I think you have to activate each door. I know you can't just walk through the first door, you have to come at it a certain way, and the doors are very grand. They're like these 20-foot doors, and they show a wonderful illustration of the door and a great I think, a fantastic illustration of the inside of the sphere. To me, it's again one of my favorite kind of room illustrations. Just something very unusual. You could have just had a plain room, and the way they did this spherical room with these little
Yeah.
ledges and things just made the whole thing just that little change of making it spherical just made such a cool room out of it. So I think I love that last encounter.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's it. That spherical room is what elevates it for me. I mean, it's brilliant design, and it's like you say, just take something simple instead of just having
yeah.
a circular room. You look on a map and you're like, wow, it's a circular room, but then it's
Mhm.
like you actually read the description. It's actually a sphere, and like you said,
Yeah.
there's actually
Yeah.
things going on with that.
Mhm.
So which, like you said, brings the next level. And yeah, that the whole other book, I mean, I believe it was a 64-page book. I think all said and done, a typical adventure was 32 pages, if
Yeah.
that. But there was that whole second book of all monsters. And again, this is before Monster Manual 2 came out. So
Yeah.
at this point, we had for what, 6 years, I think, because this was
Oh yeah.
this was 1982. So really it was probably only like 3 years. But
Mhm.
for 3 years not to have an official monster book and only
Yeah.
have a couple little new
Oh yeah.
monsters here and there, this was huge. Just as huge to
Yeah.
get like 20 new monsters.
That little book was precious to
Yeah,
me.
it
I
was.
remember very well using the Darrow and using creatures, and
Yeah,
they were all really had these wonderful, especially the Darrow had these wonderful illustrations in that book, and were really described in some detail. And I definitely used those as like add-on monsters until
oh
kind of
yeah,
the official Monster Manual 2 came out. So yeah, great, and not a throwaway book, but a really good add-on book. And there is wilderness leading up to the dungeon.
yeah,
There's that part, and it's set in Greyhawk, and there are definite allusions to, Igwilv and certain elements of Greyhawk lore. I think there's a lot of people now who bought, the Tasha's book, not realizing that Tasha is Igwilv and the whole how it all kind of connects, and it is kind of interesting.
yeah,
So yeah, I eat that stuff up. I think it's just it's a fun one. Like I said, I
yeah,
understand people's criticisms because it can feel like, monster after monster after monster packed very tightly in these caves where you kind of, those ecology folks will say, well, why aren't these monsters kind of fighting more? And I think that's a totally valid comment. But aside from that, I think, there are some fun little set pieces in here,
yeah,
little bits of
yeah.
Gygaxian, little Gygaxian gems that are sprinkled about.
Yeah, exactly. I love the wilderness. The wilderness crawl was cool. I
Mhm.
remember there was a whole bit about trying to find out where the caverns were. You weren't actually
Oh
sure.
yeah.
That was a big
Yeah.
part of it, of checking out all these in the mountainous region. So that was like a whole
Mhm.
part of the thing. Originally a tournament adventure. It was kind of sad that there wasn't, the scoring was not in there, but they packed so much stuff in.
Mhm.
And this was actually one of the earliest. I think this was the 1976
Mm.
WinterCon tournament. So this was an early tournament, if I recall. So there's that. I mean, that's part of it too, where you kind of get that packed in monster thing. It's this, those early tournament modules weren't necessarily the best campaign modules. I mean,
Right.
you kind
Right.
of could make them work, but it just didn't exactly. We did have a comment in there. OAR treatment, question mark. Yeah, somebody already beat us to that one. So if I'm not mistaken, I think Wizards already did it. But that would have been a good one. It was definitely on our list back in the day.
Yeah.
So
No, we definitely more than once heard that request.
yes, yes. So just for some reference points and everything, this is the first S adventure to show up on our list. So that's kind of
Mm.
interesting. I
But
mean,
will it be the last?
will it be the last? Probably
I
not.
don't think so.
I think the question more is will they all make it? I mean, I think that
Mm.
might be an interesting question. And also for some perspective, S4 was number 22 on the top 30 list by Dungeon
Okay.
Magazine. So we had it at 19.
All
Dungeon
right.
Magazine 20 years ago had
Huh.
it at number 22. So, but we're right in there. We're right in the wheelhouse and
Okay.
everything. So that works out pretty good. So oh, I see the history professor is in the house,
Yeah.
so a history prof. So yeah, so any final words on S4? So I know this was definitely not one of my favorite
Right. Yeah.
adventures,
I
but
think I was a bigger fan than you. And like I said,
totally, yeah.
I do get the criticism,
Yeah. I think I like that extra book better.
Yeah.
I like that book of monsters and the new spells and the magic items and the
Yeah.
artifacts. And I thought that I think if that book is in with this module, I'm
Mhm.
not sure we're talking about it. I don't think we're definitely not talking about it on this show.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe it shows up on our list somewhere, but probably back 10 or
Yeah.
15 or 20 spots,
I
probably.
agree. I think the
Yeah.
book definitely elevates.
Yeah.
I like the adventure, but the book is what
Yeah.
helps sell it and put it over the top for sure.
Agreed. Agreed. So, all right. So let's get to our next one, number 18.
Number 18.
All right. I told you about this theme. I told you about this theme of things I
Yeah.
can't pronounce. So, C1, the hidden shrine of Tamoachan.
I always say Tamoachan.
And you're probably right.
Again, I have
This
no
is
clue that.
yes. So wait,
Yeah.
before we go any further, this is your favorite adventure, correct?
It is.
Yes. So all right. So I'm not going to do much talking, because I do know this. This is another one. I will give you my perspective on this one.
Sure.
So, back in the 80s, I did not like this adventure. And if you look at my copy of it, it is in great condition because I think I
might
only
trade
ran
you.
it once and I never really read it and everything.
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, I was not a fan of the Aztec mythology.
Yeah.
Once I hit Egyptian and got past that,
Mhm.
Babylonian, okay, Mesopotamian, yeah. But once I got past Egypt, my interest in ancient history kind of waned.
Mhm.
And I just was not a fan of South American archaeology,
Yeah.
culture, that whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to, I'm gonna say probably the 2000s, maybe even the later 2000s. Somehow I ended up with a copy of this big, huge coffee table book on mythology and archaeology, like around the world, and there was a bunch of chapters that were that were dedicated to Aztec and Incan and everything.
Mhm.
And I remember sucking that stuff up and loving it as a setting. And I actually even designed adventures based on that, like
That's
mythology
funny.
and kind of setting. So I've kind of come to appreciate this adventure more.
Mhm.
But back in the day, there's a long-winded way of back in the day saying, I'm not a fan in the 80s.
Yeah.
I've come to appreciate this one much more, probably through osmosis from you, probably, and all the
See, I'm
conversations.
catching.
So,
No, but and you raised to me what I would put as the number one kind of criticism of this book. Now, by extension, I think you could extrapolate that to Pharaoh and some other modules that
yeah,
basically, but I think for whatever reason, it's easier for people, or people tend to like Egyptian more, or maybe just
yeah.
because they know it better from popular, culture and
I,
movies and
I
things.
I think it's also in
Um,
in schools, in American schools. I think it's taught more. I think Egyptian there's just more to it.
yeah,
'Cause I
that's
think
what I
it's
mean.
focused
The
on more, and
whole,
then afterwards they're like, oh yeah,
yeah,
then there was the Aztec and the
because
Incas.
if you ask people about mummies and things and
Yeah,
pyramids, they sort of have at least a little working knowledge. But if you start talking about like Mesoamerican kind of mythos,
yeah,
which is weird because it's closer to us, people don't. And I mean, but that's the point. It's basically, yeah, that is a big stumbling block. If you have an issue with the theme and it is very steeped in that theme,
yeah,
you don't get that fantasy necessarily medieval vibe. So in the same way that, Expedition of the Barrier Peaks or Pharaoh or something that's not your traditional kind of, European medieval dungeon crawl kind of thing, if you can't, if your players or you can't stray from that path, then you're not gonna like it, period. But I think if you can accept that, if you can embrace that theme, or at least deal with it, I think then you're fine. Then I think you have a host of cool encounters.
yeah,
There's role-playing opportunities. There's just some wild, crazy villains. You've got, an ancient Aztec or Olmec or whatever it is, vampire with some interesting abilities. You've got like a undead mummy centaur, or whatever. How often do you see that? You've
yeah,
got giant crabs and, yeah, a talking crab that taunts you and brings in its big brother and all these kind of crazy things. But there's a lot of puzzly kind of rooms in here too, which I really love.
yeah.
one puzzle in the beginning that's just a simple statue with it. That statue has eyes that are gems, and it's very tempting for the players. And there's sort of like this fragile shelf that the statue is holding, and the players have to kind of basically figure out how to get up on the statue if they want to get these gems. And of course, nothing is as simple as it sounds. And from that point on, there's a lot of devious little tricks like that. There's a room full of mirrors, which I'm sold as soon as you say room full of mirrors.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple very devious traps. There's a wonderful kind of closing room sand trap in here that I love, and I have absolutely tortured players with. And there's a big rolling wheel that comes bounding down the hall and smushes you, and it's very Indiana Jones boulderish, So yeah, to me, like, you've got all that kind of stuff. You've got lots of cool encounters and little set pieces and puzzles and things. I think the only other critique I would put against it is there just isn't a big bad at the end. There's no,
Yeah.
you have a wonderful timer because there's poison gas and you get kind of dropped into this pyramid. You basically have to get out or you're going to die. So you have this wonderful time limit because it's exit or die. But then when you kind of get to the top, and most groups you can go both ways, but most groups will start at the basement and work their way to the top. There's kind of nothing up there. There's a treasure catch up there that's trapped, but it would be wonderful to have some sort of, I don't know, you get this very Bat God Camazotz kind of thing on the cover of the module that never shows up, and it would be wonderful to have, I don't know, something show up and fight the characters up there.
Yeah.
So I always felt that like it lacked a big bad at the end,
Yeah.
But yeah, as you know, but yeah, I can't say enough about this thing. I love it. As we mentioned in our encounters show and talking TSR, I love you play a living game of pelota in one room where you're striking a rubber ball and trying to get it down to a goal to receive a magical prize, and the ball's fighting you and trying to go the other way, and that's a cool encounter. So yeah, just tons of stuff like that. Very thematic and fun,
Yeah, I agree. I have a lot, much more of a respect for it now. Another early tournament adventure. They did include the tournament scoring in this, which is great, which I sucked up. And when we started doing our team tournaments back in the days for Goodman Games, it was a heavy inspiration there. This is something I noticed when I was doing my review for this. We talk a lot about, especially with Gygax, his economy of words and the fact that he could pack a lot of content in a very small amount of things. This adventure is not that. You go back and look at it. There is no artwork. There's an artwork book where they put all the artwork.
Yeah.
But in the actual adventure, there is no artwork, very little artwork.
Yeah.
And it is text, and packed in there. And like almost no room for breathing, no room to come up for air and everything. So Harold Johnson and Jeff Leeson, the authors in this, no economy of words here. They just described everything out. They used up every last bit of real estate and then took all the art and put it in a whole nother book, which I love. The Tome of Horror kind of style artwork of you open up the door and this is what you see. I absolutely love it. Love
handout books.
Yeah, that is a great feature of it. So that part is good. The Gibbering Mouther makes an appearance in this adventure, which is great. So I do remember that. That's one of those things where it's probably one of the first things I think of when I think this adventure. The second thing I think is once again, this could be our second theme of the night, the Errol Otis cover art.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's
two good covers in a row.
Yeah, it's got that working for it. So a little bit of perspective. This is interesting. So this is our second C adventure on the list. C2, Ghost Tower of Inverness, made it as number 29. And this one makes it as number 18. I agree with that ranking. To be honest with you, I'm not sure I actually agree that C2 should have made our list, but I do understand that it is a popular one.
Yeah.
But if you actually break that adventure down, there's not a whole lot of meat on those bones. But no, on the Dungeon Magazine list, it also came in at number 18. That is a direct crossover.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Ding.
Yeah, ring the bell on that one. Even though our list goes to 50 and theirs really goes to 30. But I thought that was amazing that they are actually both the same numbers. So
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, this is
20
one that's
years later,
grown
and
on
it
me.
still ranks the same, right?
Yeah, so
That's
so I
hysterical.
do have a question. You sort of answered it. So you said there was no big bad at the end. Who did you want as the big bad? Did you want that demon thing on the cover, or what would you?
Well, I definitely, and again, I love the cover, and Erolotus did two versions, but I like the original mono cover,
Oh, okay.
which again has this sort of bat entity fighting. You don't know what it is because you don't encounter it. And I guess that was the tease is when you see that Erolotus cover, you're like, I want that bat thing. And then you go into the book and there is no bat thing. And I think it's supposed to represent, and I know I'm probably mangling the name, but I think it's supposed to represent Camazotz or whatever the bat god is.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, lots of different kind of gods are represented in this. It's not really represented as a pyramid dedicated to one god. You kind of get all these sort of allusions to different gods and shrines to different gods as you kind of work your way through this book. So I don't know what they'd put at the end, but just I don't yes, something. To just end it with a trap, and it's a very fiendish trap, but at least the kind of players I have, they want to be hacking at something and casting spells at somebody at the end of an adventure.
Yeah.
So to have, I don't know, something. I don't know what would, because if you play the original characters, and I think they're really cool characters that they give you, the pre-generated ones, they really have like a nice little backstory given for them that are more backstory than you usually get for like a tournament character. They're kind of just on the run from the local authorities, and then they're
Yeah.
running through these ruins, and they kind of fall into this thing. So in a way, the local authorities are the kind of bad guys that are still there when they get out of the pyramid, technically. But so I don't know what the heck they would put up there, but
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, Vinny the Mage has a theory, says ran out of word count before the big bad guy. So
It could be.
yeah,
And it's
so
funny that you said that because one of the Gen Cons, like 10 years ago or something, I threw this in my bag, just thinking, well, if I get a chance to DM some first edition stuff at the convention, maybe I'll try to run some people through this.
and I can't believe that we're done with our whole list. No,
It's done. You missed number one, folks. I hope you
yeah,
enjoyed it. We'll see you
yep.
next year.
We'll see you next year. No, we're sorry about that. So apparently technology got up to us. I think this is in all the years, and it's been years that we've been
We've
doing
had a good
this.
record.
I think this was the first
Knock,
time we actually had
knock on wood. Yeah,
crash
we've had
on our producer side. So
on a personal, yeah, kudos to our engineer because Elena, because I've had issues on my side at home, where I've had a laptop run out of power and I've had little situations on my end, but we've never had an overall, I don't think, right? Drop
yeah,
dead
no, not
bang
at
out like
all.
that. So whatever we were
Yes,
talking about, I'm sure it was wonderful, but folks probably
yes.
missed about half of it. So
That's okay. So it's great. So C2 is a
C2
C1 is a great
or
adventure.
C1, yeah.
Yes.
See,
So and yeah, and you missed it. I pronounced it properly when we were apparently not on there.
I
So
figured
oh
my
well.
favorite module of all time,
Yep.
and
And it crashed the
the
internet.
gods, yeah, and I
So
guess it irked Cthulhu that this was above,
yep. It totally does.
Nyarlathotep because the Cthulhu lightning bolt came down and just
Yep.
blew us right out of the air. So,
Oh, okay. So we're gonna regroup on that one.
all
So
right.
so I think we did, I don't know where we missed off, but anyway, it's a great adventure, folks,
Yes.
based on a tournament. Where I think we're talking about big bads and what we want to see as a big bad, and I think we kind of came to the conclusion that we want that big demon thing on the front that Errol drew.
Yes. Yes, please.
And I want Errol to be the game master too. I'll just throw that out there as well.
Yeah.
Because I think that would
Great
be kind of
cover.
neat. So but yeah, so we're gonna, I guess, jump off to our next one here, and hopefully we'll be good to go. So this
All
is
right.
our number 17. We are getting down there.
Number 17.
All right.
There
So
it is.
that is a very recognizable one.
Oh, yeah.
I
We
can
knew that
pronounce
was
this
coming.
one, the Village of Hommlet. So
There we go.
so yeah, so finally we get something easy. Now obviously Rick and I have talked about this one a lot. This is definitely one of my go-to adventures for starting a campaign. And it's all the moat house. The village is
Yeah.
fine. I mean, it's
Mhm.
better than fine, but we've talked about this in the past, how there's
Yeah.
not a lot of direction, and you need a really good game master to kind of take the bones that are the village and actually kind of get the characters from point A to point B.
Yeah.
But then you get to the moat house, and the moat house is just so classic and tropey. I love it. I mean, I don't even know if
Mhm.
trophy's a word. It probably isn't, but it sounds like an elephant name. But it's just there's just so many classic encounters in it. You've got the giant frogs at the front. You've got a giant
Mhm.
tick. Who does a giant tick? Which is just amazing. Giant lizard with a shield stuck in its gullet. It just keeps going on. And
Mhm.
then even the moat house, it's set in a swamp, so it's kind of
Yeah.
like, it's just an interesting environment. And it's just got the upper level bandits, the whole 9 yards.
Mhm.
Lower level, you got the baddies hanging out there. You got a really nice big bad fight
Oh yeah.
at the bottom there. That's
Tough fight.
probably a
Tough fight.
TPK waiting to happen. But it's great. I mean, it just
Mhm.
there's just a lot of really good about it that we really love. Also written by Gygax. I mean, you're seeing this. Gygax is popping up
Mhm.
on this list a lot. But yeah, Rick, take it away. Give us some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to mentally look at it as two pieces, being the village and being the moat house. The village, I think it's a wonderful example village, or really a very small village, I guess you could call it like a thorp, where if you wanted to see what a village is kind of laid out like and could look like, Gygax gives you a wonderful breathing example. I love the mini maps. I love the fact that you get a map of the Inn of the Welcome Wench and a map of the temple, because again, now I think, any DM can probably just whip up a temple map, or whip up, an in map. But at the time this came out, to
Yeah.
see that in map and see that temple map, for me at least, as a player in the age I was, it was very important. It was like, really kind of showed me like these are the rooms in an inn, and this is, how it's kind of laid out, and kind of spelled out some stuff for me I didn't know. So I love those sort of mini maps. I agree. I wish, the town itself needs a little work. A lot of the characters seem like they're just kind of hanging out and not given a lot of substance. And you're told they're treasures, I guess, just in the assumption that first edition characters are just maybe possibly going to slaughter everybody and just try to take their money.
Yeah,
So a
that
lot of
was
times you
and
you
and
know you
boy did
get
they
these
have treasure.
descriptions, where a lot
Yeah.
of times they'd say, well, in a copper pot buried in their backyard under the outhouse, they've got 5 gold pieces. And I would be reading this thinking, how are the players ever going to find that? you
Yeah.
know so there is some of that, but there's bits of intrigue. You have a lot of little double agents and kind of sneaky people, and good people in disguise, and people who are not who they were supposed to be creeping around. So I like that. And the whole moat house is just wonderful. I love it. I love the actual setting of the moat house. Again, it's just, for me at least, it's such a cool little illustrative map. And the
Yeah.
fact that the back cover, I think it is, has that illustration that perfectly matches the map. So you can
Mhm.
take the actual square map and compare it to the illustration, which makes a wonderful handout I've found, and just it all links together. It just elevates the moat house even higher. And Gygax gives you these great descriptions,
Oh, he
that
does.
when you're walking up to the moat house, it reminds me of the descriptions he provides at the beginning of the Temple of Elemental Evil after this, that almost Lovecraftian, very purple prose, where he goes into, the evil cat calls and croakings and, burrs sticking to your flesh. And he just really lays the stage out before the frogs come down and probably slaughter everybody.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have had trouble with those frogs over the years, but
Yep. I lost a
love
gnome
them.
illusionist
Love
to
them.
it. Yeah, I lost a gnome illusionist to the frog, right down the frog's gullet.
Yeah, I
So
don't think you're alone in that. I think
no.
I think there's a lot of parties that went one member shorter into the to the moat house. But I love the whole moat house. I think it's just awesome. Great final baddie. Lareth the Beautiful is just perfect villain. Very tough, but perfect.
Yeah.
But like you said, you need that connective tissue. I think it sorely kind of needed what Goodman Games later provided in our original Adventures Reincarnated version, in that you needed like a lead-in encounter, where we
Mhm.
provided sort of like a bandit encounter just as you get to Hommlet. And I think it needed something like that to set the stage, that kind of give a little tap on the shoulder to the players that, there was something afoot here before things start cooking. But yeah, great module, great possible, base of operations for the characters later on. Whether it's better than Orlane, from N1, I guess we can argue, but two modules, I think, both of which have really cool little villages where I think the players could come back to and relate to various NPCs afterward. So I like that.
Yeah, I agree. I consider Orlane and Hommlet to be very equivalent. I just feel that the treatment of Orlane and the organization and how they got the characters and the cult, the cult dealings and Orlane to the dungeon was just much more efficient and streamlined and easier to run. And whereas Hommlet was tricky, and it's just again not even though it was a neophyte adventure for neophyte characters, you couldn't really be a neophyte game master. I think
right.
to get them to that. But again, we talk about this in the popularity of these adventures. 7 printings of Village of Hommlet. 7. That's a lot of printings.
Wow.
And then obviously it was combined with Temple of Elemental Evil, and in all the reprintings of that, there was a video game. There was, so it's like it stays it's stayed around, and there's a reason why it's been so popular, because it's reloved and it's revisited constantly. Village of Hommlet did not make the Dungeon Magazine top 30 list, but Temple of Elemental Evil, which Village of Hommlet was included in, did, and that was number 4 all the way up on the list. So again, remember we said our rules were a little bit different. We didn't just take one book. It's like you could so Village of Hommlet made this list. Temple of Elemental Evil, spoiler alerts, probably gonna make this list. So stay tuned for that, down the road. But that was just the way that we kind of decided to do that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about an absolute classic and a gem. And you're right, residents with lots of treasure. And it was also crazy too, just how much treasure some of them had.
Oh yeah,
some of them had like a silver dining set of plates and dishes for like 2,000 gold pieces, and that's like an obscene amount of money. They wouldn't be eking it out as a turnip farmer, if they were sitting on that kind of loot. But anyway, all right. So we have one more for the evening, and we're gonna be coming at you with number 16 next.
Number 16.
All right. So Scourge of the Slavelords. So this is the all of them,
package.
A1 through 4, plus a bunch of material.
Plus.
This is what they call a super module. 128 pages of love, printed in 1986. But obviously it was mostly reprinted of the original. And they did this with the B's, they did it with the S's, they did it with the Desert of Desolation series, where they would print these super modules and kind of combine a bunch of the original ones that were probably out of print at the time and everything. But yeah, so this is the A's. So jump right into it, Rick. What do you think about this treatment, this specific treatment of the A's?
Sure. I mean, again, looking at, because we've certainly talked about the component pieces. Looking at the overall package, I like it. I have run it, this particular package version of it. I like the whole Dame Gold's party in the beginning. I think it's wonderful. It's a really cool, event. The way you get a daily schedule, the way you get lots of, there's like Thaddeus and these various NPCs that the characters can speak to, and I've heard people criticize that setup. I think it's a great setup. I think you could take that Dame Gold's party and steal it and use it for something else very easily. So yeah, no, I like it. And then there's other expansion material too here that kind of lays out a little more of the wild coast and some of the settlements and things, and details things a little bit more, like the connective tissue. So I think it's all good. I think the only criticism I have, and it comes both from reading it initially and playing it later, is in that initial Dame Gold's thing, and I don't think this is much of a spoiler because it's really right at the beginning of the module, you get a sort of false mission. Dame Gold, I'm going by memory here, so bear with, give me a little rope. But I think Dame Gold tells you like her brother's dying of a disease or something, and she gives you this like fanciful magic potion, and basically tells you, this magic potion's been brewed and it's only good for 10 days, and then it's gonna, fizzle out, and you've got to deliver it down the wild coast or wherever it is to my brother. And sort of you're given that mission, and then the slavers just come in and kind of ransack the whole party. And your group is really supposed to kind of just pinwheel and go after the slavers. And I remember initially reading that and thinking, I don't know if that's going to work. And sure enough, my players, they were trying like heck to deliver that potion. and to the point where I forget what happened, but I basically ended up getting the party to kind of drop themselves in the ocean somehow, and the potion just sank in the ocean. That was how it got like I basically had to do a DM caveat and just take the potion out of their heads because they were not going to give up on that potion until I literally made it not an option. So that probably wasn't my favorite kind of lead in, that little false quest. I think they could have just been there, hobnobbing with Dame Gold, and they could have just left it at that. And it's worth noting this was supposed to be a continuation after the Temple of Elemental
Yeah.
Evil.
Mm-hmm.
So levels wise too, that's very weird because if you look at the original A1 and the levels, and then anybody who knows Temple of Elemental Evil, you don't,
Yeah.
you got to be a pretty good level when you're finishing out the fourth level or the nodes of the temple. There's like hill giants strolling around and stuff. So it's not like you're going to be coming out of that at third level. And I do believe they bumped up the levels in
I
this a
believe they
bit,
did.
but
Yeah.
it felt, I don't know, it felt strained to me. Like it felt
Yeah.
like they were really trying hard to connect two things that just level wise and a lot of things for me, they didn't go. They were roughly in the same area, but that's about all you could say for them. They
Yeah.
weren't that
But
terribly far away from each other in Greyhawk,
yeah.
but it was a strained connection between this and
Yeah, it was. I remember
so I have
going
to
right
say that.
from I remember going right from Temple of Elemental Evil to the Giants because that
Okay.
seems to
Yeah,
make much more sense. I mean, my
totally.
characters were like
Totally.
seventh level,
Yeah.
I think, at that point, and yeah, so we played. I've not played this version, so that was actually kind of interesting to hear that you'd gone through
Mhm.
this specific treatment. We played the A's prior to that, but prior to this version coming out. So I just bought this version just because I was kind of a completist and everything, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, there's going to be, if I recall, I believe this was the first super module I bought. I probably Temple of Elemental Evil was, but that was mostly new material. But this was the first compilation super module I bought. And
Mhm.
I was fascinated with all the new material, all the extra
Mhm.
material. There's like 20 some pages in the beginning of all new material. Then there's like another 10 pages in between. I think
Yeah.
it's A1 and A2, the wilderness
Yeah.
traveling through the humanoid lands and everything. And I remember kind of basically being, wow, they jammed so much new extra stuff in this. I thought all of them were going to have extra stuff in it. I thought the
Yeah.
GDBQ was going to have extra stuff. I thought the Desert Desolation was going to have.
Mhm.
There was a little bit of there was bits and pieces here and there, but not nearly the treatment that this one got.
No.
This one
No.
seemed to kind of get, and possibly it was a page count thing. Maybe it was just that time, or
Mhm.
whoever was working on it was
Yeah.
just very familiar with the source material, whatever the reason was. But I guess I was kind of felt that this was the way that all the others
Yeah.
were going to be done, and they kind of really weren't
That's
really.
a really good point because
Yeah.
like you, I can't say exactly what order I got them in, but I definitely this was one of the first I bought out of
Okay.
them,
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless of when they came out or what order they came out, just because I was very much a fan of the Slavelords series and I had run it.
Yeah.
I had run individual pieces of it. A1 I ran, I don't know how many times just by itself.
Yeah.
Kind of I
You're
would just
here.
yank
Yeah.
that out, that module, and run it. That was
Yeah.
like a go-to for me at one point. So I definitely snapped this up. And then when later ones came, they definitely, I hate to say, but they felt very kind of, and they felt very kind of lazy. Like they just kind of reprinted the stuff and threw it in between the covers and said, oh, well, here it is. And I felt like they were just kind of reprinting it to make money. Now, again, now kind of being in the business, I understand it could have been paid, like you said, it could have been page count, it could have been time constraint, it could have been
Yeah.
what author was available. There's a million variables flying around. So it'd be interesting to get the backstory. But this one really got the treatment because
It
I
did.
definitely felt like this one, somebody sat down and kind of put the love into it, and it shows. So out of all of them, I think, Pharaoh and the different other ones that they did, I think this one got the royal treatment out of all of them,
Yeah, but it did also really show us aspiring campaign builders back in the day how to do it too.
Mhm.
How to take, some of these modules that were not necessarily, they were sort of tied together, but not
Mhm.
really tied together, and just some of the different things that you can do to learn. Oh, okay, I can create a wilderness section and kind of tie things in and everything. And I love
Yeah.
that. I remember one in particular, there was in A2. There was the escaped slave, which was that was the way that you kind of got into the. It's like in the original tournament background, there was an escaped slave, and they left a rope hanging over the wall, and they had a little bit of information on the interior and that. And you got that. And I like that in this version during the wilderness, you could actually encounter the escaped slave. And that's how you could learn about the rope being there and everything. And you can, and but the slave thinks you're a slaver right off the bat because everybody else in this area is. So, you get a little bit of role playing that. So I was always pretty fascinated with that. Those little tie-ins. And like you said, I thought they did a really, really nice job with that. Once you get into the actual A1, A2, A3, A4, very little changes. I think this was after the Unearthed Arcana, so I think they did add some changes based on the Unearthed Arcana magic items, spells, and classes, maybe. Again, I've not read it from cover to cover in a long time, but I think they did some tweaks in that regard. But again, it was a brilliant treatment. They took a great series and then tied them up a little bit closer together and everything, and I thought really kind of did it justice and everything. And again based on an old tournament, so you're seeing that these old classics were almost all of them were originally tournaments that were kind of repurposed for sale afterwards, because back early in the early days TSR didn't think anybody would buy pre-made adventures, but they did tournaments for conventions, and then they were like, well, we're sitting on a bunch of these. We might
Gotta
as
sell
well print them up and everything. So, and again, so definitely fascinating. So interesting, on the Dungeon Magazine list, Scourge of the Slavelords showed up at number 20. So we were at number 16.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's pretty close.
Yeah.
And we've already had two of the A's show up on our list. A1 was at number 45, so just squeaked in on the list, and A4, personal favorite of yours and mine, was number 24. So the question is, does A2 and A3 make it any higher than this? I'm pretty sure we know the answer to at least one of those questions.
Well, yeah, my money's against A3.
A3. If A3 is on this list, we're all going home, but the internet's going to crash again, and it's going to be a problem. But but it'd be interesting to see if A2 makes it. A2 was another one of those that I was not a huge fan early on. I was more of an A1 fan, like you said. I could run A1 like you wouldn't believe. But A2 grew on me over the years. I really, really like A2 and respect A2 much, much more than I did back in the day. So
agreed. When it first came out, I loved A1. As soon as you said abandoned temple kind of thing, I was in. I was more about ruins and things. And to me, A2 was just a bunch of humanoids. But then as the years went on, like you said, and I started looking at it, even now when I look at it, it's like they really just did take this kind of stockade full of humanoids and they just had so much fun with it,
They did. Guard rotations and like you said,
just all
there's
the
a lot of
crazy
interesting bits
rooms
in there.
and just funny little things. There was a series of rooms with a fake ghost that some humanoids had rigged up, and these different things were just, to me, it's a great example if you want to just take a place that's just full of orcs or full of goblins or whatever, and you think that's boring. Take a look at A2 because it doesn't have to be boring, definitely has grown on me. A3 I was never a fan, and I'm still never not a fan.
I agree. I don't think I'll ever be
A4, the stock has risen for A4 for me over the years as well. So
I agreed. I'd say that. I'd say the most A2 is definitely A2. Here's a great point by M Fergus 42. A2 is one of those modules where the actual play is better than the read. I would agree with that, because it reads very much as a roster of humanoids in rooms and whatnot. But you're right, because when you present it to the players, there's a lot of ways they can just getting into the stockade is a whole adventure on its own right there. Do you go over the wall? Do you all these different things that you can kind of think about. So so I would definitely agree with that. And that one also A2 written by Harold Johnson, if I recall.
The name's popping up.
Yeah, definitely. So so that's it, folks. That's our list for tonight. So we have counted down from 20 to 16. So Rick, why don't you tell them what you got to tell them, like you always do?
Folks, as always, we are delighted. Thank you for the privilege of your time and joining us. Glad you could hang out with us and talk about these adventures we love. If you like what you saw, please give us a like, give us a follow. If you're watching us later on YouTube, subscribe to the Goodman Games channel if you haven't already. I'm sure you have. And our next show is coming out to you Sunday again, same bat time, on September 29th at 8 p.m. And we're going to go into numbers 15 through 11. So, as Mrs. Slocum would say from Are You Being Served, we're getting down to the gritty nitty. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's getting real. It's getting real. And
It's
thanks
getting real.
everybody
We're getting into the real good stuff now, folks.
Yeah,
So kind of
thanks
psyched
everybody.
because I don't know this list either. Like Chris is the
Yeah.
only one here who knows. I've stayed blind to this list, so I'm really happy and fascinated when I've seen what's popped up so far. So I can't wait to see what's, now that we're getting to 15 and below, it's really going to get interesting.
Yeah, it's getting real interesting. So thanks everybody for hanging with us through our technical difficulties there briefly. Thanks always to Elena for bailing us out and fixing the problem on the back end. So we are
Yes, keeping
always
us afloat.
pleased to come and spend a little diversion and revisit some of these old classics. So
Yeah.
everybody have a great rest of your Sunday weekend and a great upcoming holiday weekend. Take care, everybody.
Enjoy, folks.